Assalamu alaikum. This is Khadija Johra welcoming you all in the class of Finance and Banking for class 9-10. Today we are going to discuss chapter 1 Finance and Business Finance, and our today's topic is concept and classification of finance. Let's start the class. At first we are going to discuss what is finance or the definition of finance. The main function of financing is to raise funds and its use, management and investment. That's it. Financing is the management of funds. We need money in our daily life. Without money, we cannot think a single day. And businesses are completely useless without this money. This is why financing is called the heart of a business. Fundraising and management is generally called financing. And now we can tell financing is the process of planning and implementing the amount of capital required to run an organization, which sources are profitable to raise, and which projects or resources will be most profitable to invest in. Now, classification of finance. There is 6 types of financing we are going to discuss. Those are family finance, public finance, international finance, finance of non-profit organization, business finance, and finance of bank and financial institution. At first, we are telling or discussing family finance or personal finance. Money is everywhere, and there is in our life the use of money. Determining the source and amount of income of the family and spending it wisely for the overall welfare of the family is called family financing. In our family, there are one or more sources of income, and in the family finance we have to detect those sources of finance and have to spend the money from those sources for the welfare of the family members. Spending on priorities is good for the family. If a family's income is not enough to cover the expenses are determined by borrowing money from relatives, acquaintances, friends, and keeping the family finances consistent with regular income. Many families take loan from banks for land, car, TV, fridge, and houses, so there is a shortage of income and expenditure in the family. Many families again see an income expenditure surplus and invest the money elsewhere. By the way, family finance is, in short, we can say the management of money in our family. That means at first we have to determine the sources of money in our family and have to use those money wisely, as we can ensure maximum welfare of our family members. That's the family finance. And the second one is public finance. Government financing is called the public finance. Government funding refers to the determination of sources from which the annual revenue of the government will be collected and the amount of annual expenditure to be made in which sectors. In every country, every government has a definite money management. For running the country, every government have to manage the money. In this financing, we are going to discuss the management of money by the government. In this financing of public finance, at first government have to determine the amount of expenditure. That means in which sectors government will be going to spend the money for the public welfare, and then government runs for collecting those funds to mitigate those expenditure. In this case, different income and expenditure sectors are specifically mentioned through the budget. When the expenditure is more than the revenue, in the case of government funding, it's called the deficit budget. And most of the time in our country there is deficit budget. Again, if the income is more than the expenditure, it is called surplus budget. The main goal of government funding is social welfare, so roads, bridges, government educational institutions, government hospitals, law and order, social infrastructure, etc. are main focus of government financing. In order to meet these expenditure, or you can say in order to make these projects useful for us, the government has to earn income by selling income tax, surcharge, value added tax or VAT, import and export duty, saving certificates, price bonds, and sale of treasury bills. So, at last, we can say public finance is the process of raising funds um, for the projects government take to running in the country, and for the projects government take for public welfare. And in this public finance, at first expenditures are calculated, and then for those expenditure revenues are collected from people. And if there is any deficit, government have to take loans from public and private company or international companies. That's it. Public
এখন
finance
সময়
is
রাত
the government
11টা।
financing. And the third one is finance of non-profit organizations. At first, we have to know what is non-profit organization. Non-profit organizations are the institutions that are engaged in the service of human welfare, poor and deprived people, those there is no one to help, such as school, hospitals, orphanages, etc. are the examples of non-profit organizations. The main goal of these non-profit organizations is to provide services, not to make profit. The process of raising funds for non-profit organizations and using those funds properly is the financing of non-profit organizations. Although there is not the target of profit, but these organizations also need money. They raise money through the various types of donations and grants. And the money is raised, and those money raised is spent on various developmental activities. Therefore, the main function of non-profit organization financing is to identify the source of money and ensuring its proper use for the purpose of providing the best services for the welfare of human being. And now, international finance. When the area of financing goes beyond the national territory, this is called international finance. International financing refers to the discussion of a country's imports and exports, foreign exchange rates, and so on. Here, the government and various institutions import and export, foreign exchange rate, the amount of foreign investment, etc., are analyzed. Bangladesh is mainly an import dependent country, so there is a huge trade deficit every year, and remittances from expatriates play an important role in filling this gap. Business finance. The main target of business organizations is to make profit. So, business financing is completely different from other types of financing. Business finance refers to the amount of money needed to run a business and the sources from which this money will be collected and the sources in which it will be invested. Business organization refers to an organization made up of the risk of profit or loss. For the purpose of making a profit, they always like to make profit and they always target to make profit, but for that they have to collect the fund and use them properly. As a result, the financing process that a business organization uses to raise the fund and invest those necessary funds is called business financing. And lastly, finance of bank and financial institutions. We all know about banks. In any country, economic activities usually revolve centering the banks and financial institutions because business organizations transact through banks. If anyone can if anyone needs loans, they go to bank. If anyone want to buy any shares, bond, debentures, they can transact through banks. So everywhere banks are related in our day-to-day life. So we all know about banks, and that's why it is called economic activities revolve centering the banks. But banks are profit oriented organizations, but their financing process is usually slightly different from business organizations. These banks collect small amounts of funds from the mass people like you and me, create deposits for different terms with those funds, and after collecting those funds, banks have a huge amount of capital which they can use for lending, and for that we also get interest from the bank. But banks give those funds as a loan to other peoples from which banks collect high amount of interest, and these gaps of interest rates are the main profit of bank. Again, banks provide loans from those funds and charge high interest for that. This difference of two rates of interest is the main profit of bank. This is how banks and financial institutions raise fund and use those fund and makes profit. That's all for today. I think this will be useful for you. So if there is any problem, you can communicate with me. Thank you for watching the class. There is some homework for you. And now I'm ending the class. Thank you.